Okay, so today we're diving into something fascinating, the offline brain. We're talking about a mind that a lot of us have either forgotten or, for some of you, maybe never even knew existed. This is the brain that was shaped before the internet. It played by a totally different set of rules, and, understanding it actually tells us a ton about our own very online lives today. So let's get into it.
So how did it really feel? I mean, it seems like a simple question, right? But the answer, it's way more complex than you'd think. This wasn't just about things being inconvenient or slow. No, it was a fundamentally different psychological experience. It literally shaped everything. Our sense of time, how our memory worked, our ideas of privacy, even what we wanted, in ways that, honestly, we're only just starting to wrap our heads around now.
Really, when you boil it down, it's like we're talking about two totally different psychological operating systems. You've got the offline mind, which was built on patience, right? It had to rely on its own internal memory because stuff was, well, rare. Then you have the online mind, our mind, which just thrives on immediacy. It outsources memory because we live in a world of absolute endless abundance. So let's break down what these differences actually mean.
All right, first up, and this is maybe the biggest difference of them all, the way we actually experience time. See, before the internet, waiting wasn't just some annoying thing you had to do. It was a skill, a genuine survival skill even, that you had to practice literally every single day.
I love this description, weirdly muscular. It's perfect. Because think about it, time wasn't something you could just refresh with a swipe. It just moved. It was relentless, like a train that did not care about your schedule or your feelings. You couldn't bend it to your will. Nope, you had to bend to its rhythm. And that constant forward march, it trained the brain in a very, very specific way.
And this wasn't some abstract concept, This waiting was woven into the fabric of daily life. You'd wait a week for a letter to arrive, days to get your photos developed. You could wait hours by the radio, just hoping, praying the DJ would finally play your favorite song. And TV shows? If you missed it, that was it. It was just gone, forever. All of this meant that delayed gratification was the norm. Anticipation was just a normal part of life, not something that sent you into a panic.
So what's the natural result of all that waiting? Well, it's boredom, right? But here's the kicker, and this is so important. Boredom wasn't seen as a crisis. It wasn't a problem that needed to be solved immediately. It was just Tuesday. It was the default setting, the quiet background noise of life, that empty space between the things that happen.
And you know what? All that boredom, it basically acted like a mental gym. When there was no phone to grab, no feed to scroll, your brain had no choice but to generate its own entertainment. It forced you to be creative, it trained your imagination, it built up your emotional resilience, it even sharpened your attention to all the little details and the weird, funny things in life. I mean, today, we treat boredom like it's an emergency we have to fix. But back then, it was just the training ground.
Okay, so this whole culture of waiting and being bored, it has a direct impact on our next big topic, memory. I mean, when you don't have a search bar in your pocket, your brain has to work in a completely different way. It couldn't be a temporary browser, just caching information. No way. It had to be the entire hard drive.
And this right here is the key idea. The offline brain ran on something called reconstructive memory. Now, what that means is you weren't pulling up a perfect, crisp digital file from your brain. Instead, every single time you remembered something, you were actually rebuilding it, piecing it together from little fragments, from the emotions you felt, and from the context of the story you were telling at that moment.
The implication of that is, well, it's huge. It means the past wasn't this frozen, static thing you could go back and check. It was alive. It was a story that evolved and changed just a little bit every time you told it. So there was a trade-off, for sure. You lost some of the precise, factual details, but what you gained was a stronger story and a much deeper emotional connection to it.
And this quote just nails it. It perfectly shows what the offline brain prioritized. The exact date, the specific words, those details were secondary. What really mattered, what was everything, was the emotional truth of that memory. The feeling, that was the most important piece of data. That was the thing the brain fought like hell to preserve.
So all of this brings us to our next section, and it's a concept that honestly might sound completely alien to us today, maybe even a little terrifying. We're going to talk about the art of disconnecting, the freedom of being completely 100% unreachable. This is such a huge shift in how we think. Today, we're all managing privacy settings, right? But before the internet, you didn't have to. Why? Because privacy was the default. It was the automatic state of being. Your mistakes, your embarrassing moments, your awkward teenage phase, none of it was archived or searchable. Being unseen didn't make you feel lonely, it made you feel safe.
So what did that actually mean, to be truly unreachable? And I'm not talking about putting your phone on Do Not Disturb. I mean genuinely, completely unreachable. When you left the house, you just vanished into the world. There was no GPS tracking you, no last seen timestamp, no little bubble showing you were typing. If someone needed you, they just had to wait.
And here's the really crucial point. The whole feeling around this has completely flipped. Back then, being unreachable meant you had autonomy. It meant freedom. It was just normal. But today, that exact same state of being unreachable often triggers anxiety. It makes people suspicious. A lack of an immediate reply can feel like neglect. Silence can even feel hostile.
And living like that had a couple of huge psychological upsides. First, it pretty much eliminated what we now call hyper-responsibility stress. That constant nagging pressure that you owe everyone an instant reply. And second, when you couldn't just post a feeling online and get instant validation, you had to learn how to deal with it yourself. You learned to sit with your emotions and regulate them on your own.
Now, this idea of autonomy and disconnection also ties right into how we used to process information. Because in a world of scarcity, where information wasn't everywhere all the time, our instincts about who to trust and even what to want were just fundamentally different.
Think about it this way. When you couldn't just pull out your phone and fact-check something in 2 seconds, you had to judge the information differently. The most important question wasn't, is this information accurate? It was, is this person reliable? You had to learn to read people, their character, their tone, their intuition, not just click on links and check citation.
And that same principle of scarcity totally changed how desire worked too. Because when you had way fewer options for, say, music or movies, your attachment to the things you did have just naturally got so much deeper. You didn't just sample 10 seconds of a song on a playlist. You bought the album. You listened to it over and over until it became a part of who you were. So desire was deep and enduring, not broad and fleeting like it often is today.
This really gets to the heart of a different kind of satisfaction, doesn't it? The offline brain basically connected value with effort and rarity. If you had to work for something or if it was hard to get, you just cherished it more. So rewatching that favorite movie or rereading a beloved book wasn't seen as boring or a waste of time. It was a comforting ritual.
Okay, so this brings us to our final section, and maybe the most profound difference of all. This is the great mental divide. It's a communication gap that causes so much friction, especially between generations. And it all comes down to one simple, powerful thing: what silence actually means.
And here it is. This is the divide in a nutshell. To the offline brain, silence, like not getting a letter back right away, was just an absence of data. It didn't mean anything bad. It just meant life was happening somewhere else. But to the online brain, silence is not neutral. Silence is the data. It's that read receipt with no reply. It's the text left hanging. And we almost always read it as something negative, disinterest, or even disrespect.
This explains so much. When someone who grew up in that offline era seems weirdly calm about not getting constant updates, it's not emotional numbness. It's not that they don't care. It's because they're operating on what you could call emotional continuity. They just assume the friendship, the bond, the relationship is still there without needing constant digital proof. For them, the connection is held in memory, not refreshed by messages.
So, where does that leave us? Look, we're not going back, and let's be honest, we probably wouldn't want to. But it does leave us with a really important question to think about. As we all try to navigate this crazy digital world, which parts of that old offline mindset, things like patience, a reliance on our own internal thoughts, finding comfort in being disconnected, which of those are worth fighting to keep alive? Something to chew on, for sure.